Well, bear with me as I'm filling in for a chair here, but I think we can call to order the March 23rd Planning Board meeting. This meeting is being recorded, so if you object, please hang up. And Elizabeth, any other starting out points I need to make? I'll take a roll.
Yeah, no, just the roll call vote would be great.
Okay, Linda.
Here.
Nathan.
Here.
Haley.
Here.
Kate.
Here.
And myself are here. So that's 5 of us. And tonight, the agenda memo said we suggest we have the public hearing first, but the posted agenda has the public hearing for 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike starting at 7:30. So even though that's just a continuation, it looks like we will come back to that in about 28 minutes. And we can start with some administrative items. The first thing is the WCAC or West Concord Advisory Committee member nomination, which is Amy Robinson. So if Amy, Elizabeth, if you can unmute Amy. And if you just want to, we've got your green card and saw that. Thank you for submitting that. And if you just want to take a moment to introduce yourself, and then the board can recommend for appointment to WCAC.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Amy Robinson. I live in West Concord. I moved here about 5 years ago. I've lived in Massachusetts for about 10 years now. I'm originally from Pennsylvania. I'm a lawyer. I work for a judge in Boston, and I have 2 kids. One is in the Carousel preschool and pre-kindergarten class there, and the other one's in 1st grade at Thoreau. I was just looking to get involved locally and obviously have a obvious interest in West Concord.
Super. Thank you for raising your hand to be on the committee. Have you been going to meeting? Have you been involved in WCAC at all to date?
I've attended 2 meetings that actually happened and one where they didn't make quorum. So I got to use that opportunity to ask some questions about it.
Yeah.
And then I watched them meet twice before today.
Does anybody have any questions for Amy? Okay. What, Amy, I started out my town committee service on WCAC. It's a great place and you'll learn a lot about West Concord, and it can be really valuable in vetting issues for the planning board. So thank you. If without further ado, I think we can, if somebody would like to make a motion to nominate Amy to the select board for appointment as a full member of WCAC, that would be great.
I would like to nominate Amy Robinson for a recommendation to the select board as a member of WCAC. Was that right, Burton?
Yeah, I mean, you could for a 3-year term.
For a 3-year term?
Ending at the end of the 2024 town meeting. I'll second that.
Per Burton, and thank you, Amy.
Thank you very much.
All right, with that second that I made, we'll take a vote. May I start with Linda?
Yes.
Nathan?
Yes.
Haley?
Yes.
Kate? And
yes.
And I vote in favor as well. So welcome aboard, Amy. Thank you. And welcome to the WCAC.
Thanks so much.
All right. We have 25 minutes left. So until the public hearing. So we can either jump into the zoning bylaw amendments or take care of the minutes. I'm going to guess the minutes are going to be quick. I think we had minutes for March 9th. So maybe we'll just get that out of the way. Did everybody get a chance to read them or have any comments on the minutes? I've read through them, but I'm just going to refresh myself on which meeting this was.
9.
Yeah, I'm just Yeah, okay. I did not have any changes to the minutes for March 9th. Did anybody else have any comments? Linda?
Yes, just one typo. The very last sentence on the last page under Planning Board Liaison, Town Planner Updates, the last sentence says, she also reported that there, I assume that's are several applications that potentially could be before the board soon, as opposed to a, the word a.
Okay,
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry.
all
Yep.
right.
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth, you got that? With that, would anybody like to make a motion to adopt the minutes as amended by Linda?
We'll make a motion that we adopt the minutes of March 9th, 2021 as amended by Linda.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favor, Linda,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
I'm in favor. All right. Let's go ahead and move to the 2021 annual town meeting zoning bylaw amendments. So I think for the most part, we have been through these. They've now received, we've been through all of them. They're mostly substantially the same. I think we had some outstanding questions on the basement exclusion from 4221, I think it is, or 4112, that had been proposed, and maybe we're looking for an illustration of what that would look like. And then we received more extensive modifications from town council on the earth removal bylaw. If it makes sense, maybe we take care of the easy ones that and see if we've got agreement to go ahead and move to submit the amendments, the ones that we've already looked at pretty closely. So I would suggest maybe just going in order of the memo, starting with the tree preservation bylaw. I took a look at that. I did not have any further comments. The format was that we saw the yellow highlighting, I think, were the tweaks that town council had made. And this is the bylaw, again, providing protections for invasive trees that are remaining and following the standards of the ANSI standard for tree, shrub, and woody plant management. Does anybody else have any further questions or comments, or I guess let me just say recommendations against moving this for consideration at the annual town meeting? Awesome. What I think we'll do, just in the interest of time, is
Linda has a question.
oh yeah, Linda, I'm sorry. Yes,
Again, just a typographical issue.
please.
In the paragraph 5.5.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, at 5.5, paren A, where the bold print starts, it says, if invasive tree are to remain on the property. And I think maybe you'd want to say if an invasive tree is to remain,
Or
if invasive trees are remaining on the or are to remain. Yeah. That's all. Sorry.
Well, so, but then the second part, it must, then it,
Right.
so that should be they.
No.
I would switch. Yeah, I would switch it to the singular.
Yeah, I would say if an invasive.
An invasive tree.
I agree. If that's just as good for you, Linda.
That's good with me.
It must be protected.
Okay.
Okay.
And at the let's see. I think it also, in the box at the bottom, number 2, many property owners wish to preserve as many trees as possible on their property. Even if they are invasive. So these trees should also have tree protection measures installed because damage to, I would say, these trees, because you're talking plural. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other, is everybody else good with that one? Elizabeth, what would you prefer in terms of, would you prefer that we sort of bucket together the ones we're ready to go ahead and forward and do it as one vote? Or
No,
vote on each one?
I think it would be easier if the, I know it takes longer, but I think it'd be easier if the board individually
Okay,
move to put forth the tree preservation bylaw warrant article.
okay. So may I ask for somebody to move to submit that article to the annual town meeting? The wording I think that we need to follow is that's in the memo.
Pretty super easy, just move to submit the tree preservation
I've always
bylaw
wanted-
amendment as written.
I can move. Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
I move that the board submit the tree preservation bylaw as amended to the 2021 annual town meeting.
Thank you, Linda. We have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Kate. So all in favor,
Nope.
start with,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'll start with Linda,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I'm also in favor. So that is recommended unanimously for consideration by ATM. We good? Did we do that right, Elizabeth? All right. great.
Perfect.
All right. Next, we'll look at the floodplain conservancy bylaw, which I know there's a lot in there. Am I correct that this is essentially a model provision, Elizabeth, right? It's been adopted for us.
Correct. Well, I'm gonna say 95% of it is all within the state's model bylaw, and have gone back and forth with the state's floodplain coordinator on amending a couple of things based on town council's suggestions, and everything that town council suggested, except one item, they had no issues with. And then, but the two items, as the warrant article, we tried to, I tried to show in the warrant article, there's these changes that are in bold italics and bold underline. And in the explanation, it talks about the things that are bold italics are those items from the model bylaw that the town does not have the ability to change or not include. And then the bold underline is the sections in the bylaw that are the implementation of the compensatory storage requirement. This is the policy that the town has had in place since the late 1970s.
Okay.
And it's the 1 to 1.5 ratio for compensatory storage. So I just tried to differentiate between that requirement and the model bylaw requirement. There is and this has been a standard practice these past 30 years. It is not a, the 1 to 1.5 is not a, a hard, a hard, fast rule. There have been, many, not many, there have been quite a few cases where an applicant goes through Natural Resources Commission, and the project that they are proposing, the work in the floodplain, they're actually doing, a lot of improvements to the site. An example would be the Chase Bank at 1134 Main Street that was just approved. They did work in the floodplain. They were not able to do 1.5 to 1 compensatory storage, but all the other site improvements, getting the building's first floor out of the floodplain, the drainage and stormwater improvements. So this section that you see on the screen in front of you does allow for the Board of Appeals to reduce the compensatory flood storage down to 1 to 1, based on that recommendation from the Natural Resources Commission. And the 1 to 1 is compensatory storage is the standard requirement in the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay, thank you. Just one quick comment while you've got that language right in front of you. In that town language, it says the board may allow ... upon a recommendation of the Natural Resources Commission, and it should say, I think, a finding that the reduction instead of the
What we had on the screen is not there.
So for people that are new to these somewhat, it seems like a biannual or floodplain updates, essentially we're required as part of the federal flood insurance program to have these provisions in our bylaw, correct? But we, as you just described, we do have the option to make some modifications, and those are the things that you've put in that are that they are underlined in bold, italicized in bold, right?
Correct.
Okay. And those italicized things in bold, we've gone to the state, you said floodplain coordinator, and they gotten their sign off. Okay. Let me open the floor. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this? I know this is somewhat of a technical provision, but. Okay. Does anybody have any concerns if we go ahead and move this in the form with just that small tweak that was just made for Elizabeth to go ahead and move it to recommend to the annual town meeting?
Burton, Sue Felshen has raised her hand, so I don't know if you want to take public comment.
I think that's appropriate, as opposed to coming back later. Yeah, so if Sue can be unmuted if she's not already.
I am already. I was very late, but I submitted comments on several bylaws to Elizabeth over the weekend, which you may not have seen. And I found a variety of small typos and a couple of things where the language didn't quite make sense. None of them are substantive, and I don't know. I mean, you can always take them up later and move the article different from how it's printed in the warrant. But in case you want to deal with them now, I leave it up to you.
So they're already incorporated too.
Oh, they are. Oh, okay, wonderful.
I can tell you the only thing I did not incorporate was for me to there was one small and any of your changes in any of the bold italics are easy to make, but items in the other parts, I mean, again, it was nothing substantial, but all of your detail edits for any of the bold italics were included.
Okay, except first of all, Sue Felshen, 19 Sunnyside Lane, for the sake of the minutes. And second of all, at the very top of the article, you didn't add strikeout.
Yeah,
oh, you did add strikeout. You just added it at the beginning. I apologize. I was looking for elsewhere. Thank you. Great. And I'll
Okay.
just assume that that's also the case, Elizabeth, for the other articles, so I won't
Yeah.
bring it up there. Yeah, cool.
Well, if it's not there, you can point it out, definitely.
Okay. All right, yes, I'm happy to, Sue, if you would identify other things as we move through the other articles to take comments as we consider each one. Okay. So I think with that, we would be ready to consider a motion to recommend this to annual town meeting. So we want to take turns?
I make a motion that the board should move to submit the floodplain or the floodplain bylaw warrant article as drafted. Lost my place. To the 2021 annual town meeting.
Thanks. I'll second that, Nathan. All in favor, starting with Linda? You're on mute.
No.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Thank you, Linda. Haley,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes too, so that's unanimous. So you still have your hand up. I'm going to just presume that that was from before. Okay. All right. That takes us to, I think, well, let's go to, let's come back to the earth removal one with 723. I think we can probably get through one more of these before we go over to the public hearing. Let's do the restaurant seasonal outdoor seating. We had a lot of discussion about this at the last time. I think with respect to any changes that came over from town council, they were pretty minimal. Elizabeth, do you want to put that up?
Yep. So we, after talking with town council, I completely simplified this. Before it had a whole new sentence at the end about, seasonal seating shall, be exempt from the one space or 3 seats rated capacity. And then town council threw in another sentence that completely completely changed everything. So then I went straight to this, and town council agreed that that simplified and made it obvious that the exclusion is only for the seating, and there is no confusion that it about the employees. And then all the other highlighted is the changes that town council or Sue made.
Okay, and sorry, I guess I didn't understand the formatting of the yellow highlighting. So you're highlighting the things that are changed, but it's not necessarily that's the exclusive thing that's changed. I got it. All right. I think there was a lot of really good discussion on this. We kind of, I went around the bend on this, having raised some concerns, and I think Nate, you and maybe it was Kate or Haley that made some comments in support of this. Does anybody have any further comments or edits that they would like to see made? I don't think I had any little editorial or nit changes on this one. So with that, Elizabeth, let me ask, can the chair make motions, or is that okay? So I'll take this one, that I'll move that the board recommend to move to the recommend for consideration by the 2021 Concord annual town meeting.
I will second.
Okay, Kate, thank you. Then all in favor, I will start with Linda,
yes,
Kate,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Nate,
Yes.
and I'll vote in favor as well. So that's unanimous as well. Okay. With that, well, 726. I guess we can, let me just see which the other articles are here. One
But
second.
your two-family and residency.
Two family, yeah, let's move to that. The two family in dwelling in residence C, that's the one that's not the garage exemption one. I think in that one, it was interesting. I think the only comment I had was it looked like town council had, oh, this one. You see that the deletion of the comma in that first sentence highlighted in yellow? That exact same language is in the sentence structure is in the other one, but they didn't delete the comma. So we'll come back to that.
Well, so that is actually and
Intentional.
No, that's Sue caught this change, and I was going to read what she said, but since she's here, I'll let her explain the grammatical difference between this sentence and this sentence.
Okay, I was actually just skimming through the other article to make sure that you did in fact incorporate. So now this was the two family. I've forgotten what I said. The difference between create an additional dwelling than part of the existing, oh, with or without the comma. Right, yes. So without the comma, it meant that the existing building could never have a tunnel or a pergola for any purpose, regardless whether it had to do with additions for creating a dwelling unit. Whereas if you throw the comma in, it means that you're not allowed to use a tunnel or a pergola in order to connect them so that you can add an additional dwelling unit. And you probably don't want me to explain in any greater length than that, because you just want to kill yourselves. But I'd be happy to. I could go on for hours.
Can you just, I don't want to belabor it, but go through that. You say without the comma, you're saying that any additions shall be integral to the existing building. I'm not quite clear on how the comma cuts off or not.
Let me give you an example. Suppose you want to put on an additional dwelling unit to your house.
Mm-hmm.
And so you put one on that has a nice shared wall, just like the intent of this bylaw. But then you decide that you want to smack a pergola on the far side of your new additional unit.
Mm-hmm.
The pergola is not connecting it to the existing unit. So if you don't make the change I suggested, some crazy lawyer could say, well, you're not allowed to have a pergola because of the way the bylaw is written. And you only want to prevent a pergola in order to make the two things be connected.
Okay, so, and you think that even with the words use of, implying that the pergola is the thing that creates the connection, that the comma impacts that.
Well, now I am going to go and pull up, this was the two family, my particular version of it with my edits, because I know I said something.
So I'm going to actually jump in here, and given that this creates more confusion and cause for discussion than I think is good to have for a warrant article. And while grammatically Sue's comments may be right, I can tell you that the interpretation of this bylaw is solely in the hands of the building commissioner, and the intent is that the use of a tunnel or pergola cannot be used to connect a two-family dwelling or an addition to an existing building. So
I withdraw my comment then.
I would prefer that we just not do this.
It's okay by me. I don't have that strong a feeling.
Okay.
Hey.
Okay. So I don't think that this, again, I'm sure everybody's been following along, but this is the one that essentially we've got an existing bylaw that allows for the creation of a two-family unit in in buildings that existed at the time, the zoning district in which they're located was created. So buildings essentially from the 1920s. What this does is add to allow within residency the creation of new two-family dwellings or alteration of existing family dwelling without that time limitation of when the original building was created. In fact, it could be an entirely new building. We were going to move this before town meeting last year, but because of the restrictions on format that town meeting had last year, we withdrew it. I don't think that we had a lot of conversation about this last time. I'm certainly ready to vote in favor of moving this to town meeting. Does anybody else have any comments, questions, concerns?
So I will say, so town council did ask, so the two-family garage warrant article, they asked why these weren't incorporated. And I'm going to advocate that they be separate warrant articles, because these two sections, these two paragraphs are completely different things. And as you saw from the graphic, this first paragraph is, has its own uniqueness to it that requires a little bit more explanation. And one warrant article may make it to the consent agenda and the other one may not. I never advocate for amendments to zoning bylaws on the floor of town meeting. It's too reactive, and there's not enough time to kind of vet unintended consequences. So I would just rather that I'm advocating that the two be separate warrant articles.
And given that, can I ask the procedural question? So we would move this one first, and if the next one passed, it would just simply modify the first paragraph, which we're not changing
Correct.
here. So, and does it do? I don't have the full bylaw in front of me. Is it not needed to have the second paragraph be 4221, 422.2?
No, you already have the 4222 is the new accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
Okay, so I guess the one thing I just want to make sure that we don't do is if we pass this, then we pass the other 422 one bylaw amendment, that it doesn't remove the new paragraph, right? That it needs to be. You're going to say it doesn't, right?
I don't believe it does. What it would say is it would let me hang on one second.
I mean, hopefully it says modify this paragraph to add these words.
Yeah, so that the first paragraph reads.
Okay, perfect. Right.
And
Well,
if the two-family residency doesn't pass, whether there's a second paragraph or not, this is still the first paragraph. So I think you're okay.
yeah, okay. That makes sense to me. And other than that one question about the comma that was changed in one and not the other, I didn't have any further comments. Does anybody on the board have any comments or questions? And this is just on the non-garage one, the one adding the residency. Okay, and I'll ask if there are any public comments. And Sue, you still have your little hand icon up, but I'm guessing that that's an artifact.
That's an oversight.
Okay, all right, just checking. All right, seeing nothing else, I would go ahead and make and vote to move to submit the bylaw amendment to section the article the 4221 amendment to for two family additional dwelling units to annual town meeting. Could I get a second?
A second.
Second,
Oh.
I'll give that to Linda. Now I'll go around the horn. All in favor? Let's start with Linda.
yes.
With Kate,
Aye.
Haley,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I am very much in favor. So thank you. That is recommended unanimously. All right, with that, I think we jump over to what we're now late for, which is the public hearing. And that is scheduled to begin at 7:30. But that's the public hearing for consideration of the application of Quarry North Road LLC to create a one-lot subdivision with access from the town of Sudbury for the Concord portion of the tract of 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike, parcel 3419. However, the applicant has requested a continuance without discussion to June 8th, 2021. So Elizabeth, do we just need to do a vote if we're all in favor of a continuance? Is that correct?
And accept the grant of time extension to June 18th.
To June 8th or 18th?
So the continue
we
the
need
public
10
hearing to June 7:30, June 8th, and
Okay.
accept the time extension to June 18th.
Okay, so I would make a motion to extend the public hearing
Continue.
continue the public hearing without discussion to June 8th, 2021, and accept the applicant's request for an extension to June 18th for consideration of the application.
I second that.
And sorry,
All right,
Nate,
that's
you've got it.
Nate got it. All right, all in favor, Linda,
Yes,
Kate,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I am a yes. All right, and with that, I think we can close the public hearing or continue the public hearing until June 8th. Okay. That brings us back to the remaining bylaws with draft bylaws, and I think, are we now to, let's go to the garage one. So 4112. This one, Elizabeth, I think you put together, though I didn't see it in my materials, did you put together a graphic on this?
I did. Do you want to
Okay.
see the graphic first?
That would be great. Thank you.
Elizabeth, I found the graphics so helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good.
And is the idea that this could be, I mean, this is very helpful for us, but that this could be part of the materials or presentation for town meeting?
So I don't know how many years back, the warrant actually just had the proposed bylaw amendments, and it did not have explanations. And then, over the years, little explanations got put in. And since I came back to Concord, we've gotten the explanations a little bit more, a little bit more helpful, I think, when people read the warrant. But this one I was confident was pushing the envelope on having it included in the warrant. I did check with the town moderator and she did agree that this would be part of the planning board's, you're required to make a written recommendation to town meeting on whether to move zoning bylaw amendments or not. And as part of your handout, this would be part of your town meeting handout. It would also be incorporated into your presentation for the public hearing.
Okay.
But
And so as part of that, I mean, we've got time if we want to, whoever gets to own this one. Well, actually, because this was put forward by a member of the public. So does this become something that a planning board member would be presenting, or would it be presented by the proponent?
No, the proponent put this forward for the board to discuss, and if the board felt that this was a good amendment to make to this this section of the zoning bylaw, the expectation would be if the planning board supports it, then the planning board would move it.
I see. Okay, thank you. But we would have time, obviously, between now and town meeting to tweak this and refine this to make it right. Okay.
Correct, definitely.
So do you want to walk us through this? I'm just looking at it for the first time.
Sure. So the graphic that I was asked to make was to try and explain, basically this first paragraph of currently what's allowed under 4221. And if this structure right here, it was a barn built in 1915 and in 1920 they put a 500 square foot garage on the side. If this person wanted to convert this to a 2-family dwelling, the current provision says you take the gross square feet of this existing structure and 1/5 of the total gross floor area, excluding basements and open and screen porches. You can do an addition to that structure as part of the conversion to a 2-family. So 1/5 of 1,500 square feet is 300 square feet. So if you were to convert this to a 2-family, and 300 square feet would basically be about a 1-car garage.
Mm-hmm.
And that would eat up all of your 1/5 addition.
Right.
So what the proposed bylaw scenario is that the garage in this structure up here still is included in your 1/5 calculation of the existing square footage. But when you go to add an addition, if you were to do an attached garage, that is excluded from what you add. So you would be able in this scenario to add 300 square feet, as well as, whether it's a 1-car garage or a 2-car garage. That area would be excluded from the 1/5 calculation.
And I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
So that you still have that single car 300 square foot garage, I think, for comparison, but they could build a 500 square foot garage as long as they don't exceed the FAR, right?
Correct.
Or the
So,
setback.
I mean, these graphics were very quick and they were done in paint. So you're pretty limited. So between now and the public hearing, I would probably, change these graphics. And what I might actually do is actually make this, like a 500 square foot garage, so that the intent is clear, and, maybe, hash this out. All the graphics have to remain black and white, but, maybe hash this out to say, excluded. And, what I may do is repeat this graphic down here.
Got
The
it.
graphics can definitely be better, but I just was trying to give the board an idea of how this would look.
I've had a question about this proposed bylaw ever since it came forward, and this makes it I think a lot easier to explain. So we know we look at this provision of the bylaw just applies to houses that were built at the time the zoning district was created. So let's call it 1928. Is that roughly it? When they're doing this square footage calculation to come up with the 1/5 maximum addition, are they looking at the square footage as it existed in 1928? Or what would happen if they added a garage, as many of these houses would have had, added in, let's say, the 30s or the 40s? Or for that matter, somebody came along and said, I'm going to add a second garage to the other side of the house now, get myself another 500 feet in my 1/5 calculation. I'm just wondering if there's how we keep track of that, because I've got to imagine there's all sorts of houses that have had bump outs in the last 100 or 92 years or whatever it is.
You know what? I can't answer that. But I think it's, I think it's only the square footage of the structure prior to 1928.
Okay. I just imagine the records on that would be hard to come by.
You'd be surprised.
Okay.
The records in the archives are, even the assessor's handwritten records goes through and talks about square footage of structures.
Okay.
But
So from,
but I
you're-
do, but I do understand the question and the concern that can propose. It's a conversation I'd have to have with the building commissioner.
Mhm.
And then, probably Marcia, how this has been, how this was interpreted, the 32 years that John Minty was here.
Mhm.
But it's not something I do not know off the top of my head. So, unfortunately, it's not something I can get answered tonight. So,
Fair enough.
should the board want to move, put this forth on the warrant and then have these questions answered, and have a discussion further at the public hearing, that's an option. And
I mean, it's certainly the proponent who's very knowledgeable on this. I think if there was a way to game the system like that, this wouldn't be a requirement, right? You could recommend to clients who wanted to do this, well, build the garage first and then come and get the special permit and not only do you get your 300 square feet, but you could in fact get more than that, because you could build on a big garage. Yeah, Linda, you.
So that's why I think when, you read it, for grant a special permit for the alteration and use of a building existing at the time it was placed. So I think that's where, if somebody wants to utilize this section, they would have to go through and do that research
Right.
to figure out what the square footage of the building was prior to 1928.
Okay.
But given the current bylaw, could I take that, if I were the property owner, could I take the barn and garage and add on 300 square feet, divide that into two 900 square feet units, and then build two detached garages? So,
The limitation with building the detached garages is that a detached garage, if it is not placed behind the rearmost portion of the dwelling, so let's say, this is Main Street, this is the structure. If you could do this and do a 300 square foot addition over here, change all of this into a two-family, you would have to put a detached garage behind the rearmost portion of this dwelling. It could be 5 feet from the property line, but it would have to be, located behind the dwelling. So you could do two garages. The likelihood for many of these structures that you would have that type of space, maybe a limiting factor, or, the size of the lot. The alternative is that, a lot of these, very older structures, barns and such, are still located on very large, 1 acre lots. And yes, they could do that. So I think that was part of the reasoning for this, was that, in many cases, an attached garage utilizes the space on the lot better than a detached. But even an attached garage would have to meet this required 15-foot, side yard setback if it was attached. So
thank you.
Mort? Wasn't weren't we discussing in the last meeting that we went over this, potentially putting a limitation on the attached garage sides, not side, such that you could only, add a single car garage. You couldn't add a 2, 3, 4 car garage, attached garage, assuming it fit anyway.
Well, but this is a special permit process.
Oh, is that?
So it's not by
left off
right.
with that. Yeah. Okay.
So I can imagine that if somebody were gonna propose to build, to convert this and then, but again, the problem is they only need the special permit to convert the structure. After they convert the structure, if they have the room and the ability to build a detached garage, that's just a building permit.
Yeah.
It is strange that it appears that the units are, the size of the limits are controlled. The size of the units are controlled, but not the garage. So I'm wondering if there's just like language that we say like
Well,
the intent.
the size of the unit is not controlled.
Okay. Isn't it only 1/5? Can it only be 1/5 of the?
The size of an addition is only 1/5 the gross floor area.
Oh, that's what I meant. So the size of the addition is controlled, but not an additional garage. There's something a little strange about it.
Well, but so what you have to also understand is I believe this section has been in the zoning bylaw since it was first adopted in 1928. Garages weren't that important back then.
But does it exclude garages then? I thought we were adding the exclusion for garage. Oh.
No, it includes. So the original bylaw. Oh, this is. The original bylaw, when it was first adopted, was the board may grant a special permit for the alteration and use of a building existing at the time its lot is placed in a single residence district for not more than 2 dwelling units, provided and it used to say volume
I remember
of any additions shall not exceed in all 1/5 of the volume. And that's all it said. It was a few years ago that this section was amended to replace volume with gross floor area, because nowhere else in the zoning bylaw is volume used. It's all based on gross floor area. And then the maximum floor area ratio was adopted, and the language excluding basements, opened or screened porches and decks was incorporated into this section as well. Also, the change regarding not using a tunnel or pergola, since that was used a couple of times to convert a structure and add a second dwelling unit.
Elizabeth, is it correct to say that but for dividing this, really the gist of this is just focus on the division into a 2-family. If somebody was to keep this structure as a single family, they could get a building permit to add on to make the structure twice as big and add on a 2-car garage on either side of the house, as long as they met the floor area ratio for the district and the setback requirements and height requirements. The other elements of the zoning code, is that correct?
No, currently 2-family dwellings are not permitted.
No, I mean, if they kept it as a single family, because I think one of the things I was concerned about is, well, when I first looked at this bylaw, I thought, okay, so they wanted to allow 2 families so long as it didn't really alter the character of the neighborhood by creating these giant houses, right? By having 2 houses that were glued together side by side in a neighborhood that looked like a bunch of single family houses, right? And so I thought it was really about the size of the building and the character, right? But they as we know today, a building somebody could take a 100-year-old building, and instead of tearing it down, they could expand it with a building permit, so long as they otherwise didn't need a special permit or a variance in accordance with the bylaw. So, you know, they could increase the size by 100% if it otherwise fit within the floor area ratio and the setbacks. And you could have and they could put another garage on the side of it. In other words, the building, you could, if they kept it as a single family, they could probably make it a lot bigger.
Correct.
So in this case, really, this is about the nexus or the intersection of the fact that there's some limitation on the ability to expand it simply because they're turning it into a two-family.
Correct.
And so I don't know if for other people on the board, that was something that it took me a while to sort of realize. And then I once I did, I became less concerned about exactly, you know, how much, you know, what, you know, how they calculate 1/5, whether you can add on a garage or not, because they otherwise still need to comply with the other parts of our zoning code or zoning bylaw that are intended to keep buildings of a certain size, certain character in our neighborhoods, for better or for worse, or successfully or less successfully. Does that make sense?
Well, I shouldn't say whether it makes sense to me or not, because that really doesn't matter. It's whether it makes sense
So
to the rest of the board.
That's what
So can I say if it makes sense to me?
please.
So I think that's a really helpful comment. So what's the rationale, given that we're trying to incentivize the creation of these units? What's the rationale for controlling the size of the units, but not controlling the size of the garage? Like, why would you, it seems like what we should do is just put some language that somehow gets to the garage, that the size of the garage should be commensurate with, I don't know what. But like, well, look, can I just ask that question? What's the rationale for controlling the size of the unit, of the addition, but not the garage, additional garage?
I think that's a great question, Kate. I think it's that this, in part because these things get written incrementally, right? We excluded things that generally don't have an impact originally, like basements, porches, in terms of floor area. But now we're coming back to garages out of the concern that, or on the other side, sort of the logic of, well, they could easily build a garage anywhere on the lot as long as it, you know, it's behind the house or otherwise met the zoning bylaw. But the types of people that are wanting to divide their houses into two families might also be the types of people that would require the convenience of a attached garage. So maybe older people who don't want to be walking on an icy walkway with their packages. And so you can see how these things happen incrementally with sometimes unintended.
So I mean, to Kate's point, there's nothing to say that you can't, you know, pick a number. You know, what's a standard size for a 1-car garage? I don't even know. I don't have a garage.
Could we say just something like, you know, as the board contemplates a special permit, like they should be aware that the intent, you know, of this bylaw is that.
You're not going to put something like that in a zoning bylaw.
Okay.
It may be something that, you know, the Board of Appeals, you know, talks about as far as when they have to grant a special permit in neighborhood character. But I mean,
I'm not sure. We've already given limits for how large the structure could be and whether the people who are developing this property into a 2-family home from a 1-family home, whether they put 90% of it as their garage or 10, you know, or 10% of the land as their garage? I mean, it seems to me that's kind of something for them to decide what they want. I don't know why the planning board should get involved in saying, oh, you can only, you can only have a 1-car garage, when maybe there are people who collect motorcycles and want a bigger garage, but and a smaller house. I'm not quite sure why we would.
I thought
impose-
I thought you're not capping it in total. You're just capping it in the non-garage area.
Yeah, the effect of the exclusion is that you're, what Haley said. So you're unlimited, you're not limited, but I don't know, you guys, I don't think anyone's gonna do this anyways, to be honest.
Well, I did have a question actually, and
Yeah.
sorry if this is a dumb one, but because we are actually looking at converting half of our garage to living space at our house. But if somebody did this and then built like a very large garage, big because they wanted it at the time and it was uncapped, a few years later, say they decided they wanted to convert some of that to living space, like, would that be possible? And is that, against the intent?
So no, they would not be able to convert it to living space because the structure was converted by a special permit.
Okay, so it would be like tracked somehow.
Well, so let's say they converted a barn and added 300 square feet as a garage. Could they change that 300 square feet to living area? Sure. Could they change the garage to living area and then add another 300 square feet? Currently, no. Could they change that to living area and build a detached garage behind the rearmost portion of the house? Yes. So, but I mean, so what you also have to understand with this section, you could have, there's, a couple homes on like Lowell Road or Barrett's Mill Road or Barnes Hill Road. There was a house, built in, 1910, and there was a barn built in 1915. That property owner could have the single family dwelling and convert the barn to a 2-family by special permit and have 3 dwelling units on the property. So it's not, it's any building before 1928. It doesn't matter if there's already a single family dwelling on the property or not.
Elizabeth, what is your recommendation? Or did you already tell us 10 times? Sorry.
No, I mean, I can see some of, I can see some of the merits in this because, somebody can convert the structure to, by special permit to a 2-family, and then, a year later say, we want a garage, and then build a garage, by right in the rearmost portion of the house. But that also, the flip side is that happens all the time. There's houses all over Concord where in the back is the little, is the garage. And, depending on how much yard space they want in the back, they might build a 2-car garage or a 3-car garage. I mean, it's, excuse me, it is part of what, is currently permitted by a property owner. Are there, has this been a significant issue that I'm aware of up to this point? Not that I'm aware of. But I can see the merits, but if the board is struggling to try and understand this, this will be a very challenging bylaw amendment to try and move forward in a
Why-
positive direction.
I'm sorry. Are we proposing to move both forward, this one and the other one, or are we choosing one?
No, you're deciding whether you want to move this one or not.
And if we move this one, we would move the other one too?
They're separate. They're two
Yeah.
separate bylaw amendments.
Oh,
This, yeah, to clarify, Caitlin, first,
Thanks.
we did move the other one already, right? So but that one is to add an entirely new paragraph to this section to allow the creation of two families that are new in residence C. So it doesn't need to be 100-year-old house. It could be brand new construction. It could be a house built in the 50s. This is the existing preceding paragraph that's been around forever that would allow throughout town, not just residence C, the conversion of these old houses into two families, which to date is very, very restricted, right? It's a special permit. You can only increase it a little bit, and although the language has recently been updated, you've got to include a garage in your calculation of square footage. Yeah, so the one we just looked at leaves this language the same and adds a new paragraph allowing it for new stuff in residence C.
thanks. I know that like Elizabeth and you have like said that so many times. So
It's
I just,
complicated.
no, it is. I guess just for like the sake of putting a position out there, I guess I would recommend that we put this, that we don't move this.
Okay.
I don't know what.
There's one other element too, just to highlight, we briefly touched on last time, is that this is kind of driving to a particular result, but I view it as maybe a little clumsy, which is to allow the biggest increase that you can by excluding garages in the first part of the calculation, but including garages in the second part, right? So you see this line, it says it says provided the gross floor area excluding garages, basements, ... shall not exceed 1/5 of the gross floor area excluding, there's no garages there, right? Basement. So the effect is that 1/5 area is big because you're using different numbers for each calculation. Now it makes sense. It allows them to add on more, but honestly, if we've got these questions about the, well, how big could the garage be? When could the garage be attached? And could the garage be converted? All these sorts of questions. Plus, we also have this slightly funky math that's designed to maximize the amount that it can be added on. I am in support of the concept behind this, which is enabling additional two families in across town. I just voted to move the one that allows them in residence C. I'm not sure that this is a easy to understand way to do it across town, and I worry about unintended consequences.
And isn't what we want to do is take out the complexity and just, we want to control the entire square footage, including the garage. So maybe what we need to do is instead of 1/5, it should be like something like 1/4. And take out this. But I mean, I guess my recommendation is that we rewrite this entire provision. Put it on ice for now, and like next year, just rewrite the whole thing.
I mean, your suggestion right there makes a lot of sense, to change the percentage, right? If the issue is that adding a garage is always going to consume 1/5 of the typical 1,000 square foot house or 1,200 square foot, historic building. Yeah, why don't we say 1/5 or a 4th or a 1/3, right? But then you have you have more control over the entire site. I think it's a really good suggestion, and I think that kind of discussion should happen. So I'm with you, Kate. I'm not certain. I wouldn't want to have to be the member of the planning board that would be explaining this to town meeting, given the questions we've had. Yeah. I see you there.
El- Elizabeth, in the meantime, if there was like a particular landowner that like felt like they had a very unique case or something, like could they still come and ask for a variance, or is that not a thing? No. Okay.
No, the test for a variance, just because you want a garage does not meet the test for the findings for a variance.
How far separated does a garage need to be?
Under the building code, I don't know.
This much?
No, I mean, I when you build a new garage, it does have to be a certain distance, but I'm not sure under the building code what's considered attached, like whether you just have a little canopy walk, overhang. I don't know. That's a building code question.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, do you think if we were gonna take out the garage exclusion, take out the word garages and make it 1/4 of the gross floor area, just for the sake of discussion, would we have time to do that now? Or is that something that's so
No.
substantive that we would need to put it back out for public comment, et cetera?
The warrant closes Friday. So,
Okay, well,
so no. Am I in support of just rewriting this whole section, this whole paragraph? Definitely. For this town meeting, no.
Okay.
I think we have an answer.
Okay, yeah, on that, I think that maybe we'll go ahead and we oftentimes do straw polls when it seems like things are iffy here, but I'm just gonna, I think, make a motion for consideration.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to, I was going to see if anyone wants to move this for consideration. I guess if we're not in favor of moving it, then I guess there's not a vote on it, right? So we don't need to vote it down. We just need to get a motion, and if it needs to pass.
You don't even need a motion. I think you can just poll the board, see if is everybody in agreement to not put this forward? And then you won't. You don't need to have a motion or anything.
All right. Well, there are 5 of us in attendance tonight. Do 3 of us want to move this forward? Raise your hand if you do. I'll look on the video and you can. All right. I think that we've deciding not to move that forward then. All right. Let me just pause because we were doing public discussion after each one. Is there any member of the public that wanted to weigh in? And if so, I guess use your hand raising button. Okay. Elizabeth, on my screen, I can see there's 11 participants, but I can't see all of them. So, oh no, I can. I'm sorry. Just can't count. So I don't see any hands raised, which I think brings us to the exciting earth removal and earth fill proposed bylaw amendments. And there was more substantive stuff here. And Elizabeth, if you wanted to throw it up on the screen, I did have some initial comments to make in terms of some readability that I think some issues that I.
Okay. So what I can tell you is that the biggest change is the version that you got, we had put under the purpose item A, B, C, D, and I think it was E, and trying to come up with amending. You know what I can do is, would it be helpful if I bring up the old one? Okay, so previously this was the section that got added under the purpose. And my conversation this morning with town council, they felt that, you know, all of these items, especially I went through and went through DEP's regs, and I found definitions that supported, you know, many of the items in here. They felt that it would be more appropriate to take these items, which are actually, you know, criteria that the Board of Appeals can use when evaluating or granting an earth removal, and move them to that section further in the bylaw. So that was kind of the one substantive structural change. So you'll see that that list of items was taken out. Went through previously, there was a definition of air pollution, and this was town council's recommendation that you know, air pollution is a very strictly regulated item that towns do not have the ability to regulate under the Clean Air Act. But there were parts of that definition, the reason I put it in, because they tied back to noise and the definition of noise. So what I did was take those items from air pollution and stick them into the definition of noise, which now, you know, has, you know, items for, you know, that can be evaluated. And because, and I'm going to jump down just because you can see in here, it talked about, you know, excessive dust, odor, washout, noise, and traffic. And when you go up to the definition of noise, a sound sufficient of intensity. So I added the definition of sound. So that, you know, all of these items can be, you know, tied back to something that can, you know, is measurable. And then added the definition of, talked to the town engineer and the assistant town engineer, adding a definition of steep slopes and washout, because those were added down here into, you know, the criteria for evaluating. So that's how these definitions got my reasoning for including these definitions. And then I don't think this should be, I don't know how this got bold and italics. I need to check that. I don't think that should be. Yeah, so I need, somehow that got changed and I don't know how. And then these were all the same. And then, so this basically became the new criteria where from moving from the purpose, we talked about, you know, dust, odor, washout, noise, and traffic, protect and maintain steep slopes, protect surface and groundwater. And then we had the sustainable design, habitat and habitat connections, natural drainage patterns, and then, you know, reference back to the town's comprehensive long-range plan. Nathan did make the comment, you know, the long-range plan is, you know, envision Concord Bridge to 2030, but come 2030, it will probably have a new name, but it will always be the town's comprehensive long-range plan. So that's why, you know, I left it, you know, that way. And then everything else was the same as your previous version. So those were the significant changes from the version you got Friday and the version I sent late this morning.
Thanks for walking us through, Elizabeth. I thought the restructuring of the this section you have right at 7532, it just works much better in terms of, you know, I don't know if it's, well, being able to list out the criteria like that, I think works a lot better. If you could scroll up to 751, I did, in reading this, I was giving myself fits trying to figure out what was not working for me. The 751, the first.
I just want to make sure that I get, so currently, I just want to fix this before I forget. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Burton.
Okay, thanks. And first of all, I love the definition of sound. But if you go up to 751, there's this language that says where we've added in, you know, it's removal from or filling of any property not in public use of soil. That double of was giving me fits. I think that the way it really should read is this again, and not in 752, which is what you've got on the screen, but 751, the first paragraph. So it says the removal from or filling of any property not in public use of soil. I think this would just read much better if it said the removal or filling of soil, loam, peat, sand, gravel, stone from or into any property not in public use. So again, just reading it, the removal, strike out from, or filling of soil, loam, peat, sand, and gravel.
Okay.
Yep, that, so delete that, but you might copy it before you delete it because, yeah, and move that to after the parenthetical so that it says herein, quote, earth, close parens, from or into any property not in public use. That gets rid of the awkwardness of saying, you know,
Okay, so the removal or filling of, okay, and then where do you want me to?
after the closed paren, so it says here in earth, closed paren, and then that's where it would say from or into any property not in public use. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't like the structure that would have read essentially the filling of any property of soil. This didn't work.
You still need Burton's or into.
Oh, where's that? From or into, right. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. From or into any property. That would be my suggestion, but if anybody else is a better wordsmith, I take no pride of authorship. Elizabeth, can I just ask where the definitions came from for dust, noise, odor, and sound?
DEP's regulations.
Okay.
I have some,
Oh, Go ahead, Kate.
Um, for the noise section, so I just note that Concord does have a construction noise bylaw. So just note that.
So the construction noise bylaw only deals with time.
Yep. Okay.
So
So I think so going through that section on noise. So for section A, I think we need to define a nuisance. For section B, that's, I don't know what noise that would be. I feel like usually like underwater noise injures animals. And for C also, I think that's really vague. So I think that these are really, I think like any, like, you know, construction noise is regulated a little different than other noise because it's temporary and it's always a nuisance. It's always bothersome to abutters, but as a kind of as a society, we've decided that we're going to tolerate that for the sake of development. So I guess I see this as unusually like a very loose and low bar for like I don't know how someone would comply with this, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know how you would, if you're doing any kind of construction without defining nuisance or without putting limits on like what this means. I don't know how you would, as an applicant, how you would comply with that.
Kate, I hear you on the nuisance. What I mean, I think B, that's a high bar, right? Injurious, but I could actually imagine it, right?
You could, how?
Well, let's say, for example, part of the earth removal plan involve, I mean, they need a special permit for this, but would involve blasting. Or let's say it was, I mean, I live next to a site that's currently being developed, and they've been running a one of those steamrollers, the old-fashioned word, you know, those compacting rollers that vibrates, and it, like my dog goes running around and wants to jump out the window, and I want to jump out the window, and it's maddening. I'd almost call that, you know, potentially injurious to my dog. Unreasonably interfere with comfortable enjoyment of life. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, as a lawyer, reasonable versus unreasonable, that it actually sort of carries a fair bit of weight with me in terms of sort of a reasonableness standard.
Okay.
But I think you could probably stretch that, right, with in terms of what does it mean to be unreasonable. I think if we could be more precise in what is a nuisance other than like a little brother, then that would be helpful.
I wonder if nuisance is defined elsewhere in somewhere in Concord bylaws. Do you know, Elizabeth?
not that I'm aware of.
I mean, I will just say that, like, and I don't even remember if that was already a term that was in here previously in the original version, Elizabeth, but not that I don't disagree that, like, it sounds vague to, like, us as, like, commoners. But I think if you talk to, like, most lawyers who are in this field, I imagine they're very comfortable with it, only because I see this in so many other, like, I see this everywhere in other bylaws, in other towns. So, I don't know, I just, I guess it seems like a lot of people have gotten comfort around it.
Yeah,
So
I would almost
currently
guarantee.
it currently is not in the existing bylaw.
I would almost guarantee there's a standard that's been developed in the common law in court decisions of what a nuisance is. I mean, I actually think that being a private nuisance is an actual tort in a common law, meaning it's a right of act. It can create a right of action, so you can sue somebody over it. And that being the case, then I'm sure that there is sort of a common law standard for what that constitutes. And maybe what we should do is here rely on that. And this will be on your torts exam, Kate.
Well, it's so funny. I like just took my torts midterm. I'm like, I know what a tort is. Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Because usually like I've seen a lot of general noise bylaws in towns and for construction noise, it's usually not limited like this. Usually it's just something like the hours of construction because construction noise is usually a nuisance. Like it's nearly by the very nature of it, it's loud. It's louder than what you're allowed to do, on an ongoing basis on your property.
Yeah, and I would actually say like my read of it is that, and just given what you're saying, is that it's probably actually a high bar to, prove that it is unreasonable because it is so common.
So and you have to also, I think, look at it the other way, is that that high bar is somebody's going to have to say, how is there sufficient intensity and or duration that's causing the nuisance. So, I mean, this is part of, that whole special permit, process. So, I mean,
It depends for our town council.
Totally. So maybe
No, so town council still has some, reservations about, about the implementation of this. And I mean, and it may be, you put this forth. I mean, the Zoning Board of Appeals has not had the opportunity to review this. They meet next Thursday, the 8th. Is that right? So yeah, is that next week? Yeah.
I thought town council had like basically said, given comments on what they think should be taken out.
Well, they made comments on what they definitely felt should be taken out, but they still have reservations on the implementation of the bylaw. So it may be, that between, now, and, following the public hearing, there may be other amendments that would, that the board's going to have to make on the floor of town meeting. And that's fine. It's just, it's putting in a definition of nuisance. I don't think is something that we can do tonight. The one other item I was going to think is that this sentence right here, just based on the train of thought that Kate had, construction is having construction next door is a pain. I mean, I had to listen to somebody took down probably 20 trees 2 houses away today with chainsaws and a crane all day. And it was a nuisance, but I think the unreasonably interfere with, and I have a problem with comfortable enjoyment of life.
So while you've been talking, Elizabeth, I was quickly looking at the very fascinating Wikipedia page on nuisance, the law thereof, and its derivation from the property right of quiet enjoyment. And quiet in that sense doesn't necessarily mean sitting in and whispering and listening to crickets. It's a legal standard for being able to enjoy your property, right? I would suggest, and if this is going for review or legal review, it's the standard. It's just like, as I was just suggesting, and I'm refreshing myself on this common law standard of nuisance and its interference with the quiet enjoyment of as a property right. So I think saying quiet enjoyment goes directly to the legal standard to which this would be held. And Kate, is you're questioning what is nuisance? I'm sort of refresh. I'm sure I read this back as a 1L. This is a very, very evolved and defined element of common law. And so given that, I think there's probably pretty good legal legal standards in terms of exactly what a nuisance here means, what it would mean to interfere with the quiet enjoyment of property, and so forth.
Okay, good. So I guess I'm interested to know, Elizabeth saying that town council had several reservations about the implementations, and just, I guess I'm interested to know what those are.
It just goes back to, it just goes back to, this,
It's focused on that section there.
these parameters, and, just the Board of Appeals, gets down to,
Okay, well, I have another specific comment on
so,
okay.
yeah, it really, meet the purpose.
But these are not, like, none of these are really out of the ordinary, like, these exist in other towns. I mean,
Right.
in
No,
some way-
I'm not saying that they're saying, it's out of the ordinary. I mean, yeah, a lot of these are in other towns. It's so,
Okay.
when does a project get to the point where, they're not protecting surface and groundwater, or, we have a definition of steep slopes, so that's helpful. When, prevent any hazardous conditions. So there's still, what's, considered excessive dust or odor, or washout, or so these are still, they're not they're not measurable things, so there is still some subjectiveness in the implementation of this.
Yeah, I guess as I recall last year in us updating the PRD bylaw, I felt like the argument was, well, there's a benefit to not being overly specific. I specifically remember that.
So I think I think it would definitely be helpful for the planning board to get feedback from the Board of Appeals on how they view this before the public hearing.
Okay, well, so I'll just make, if I may make one more comment, it's shorter. So I mentioned this at the last meeting when we were talking about this, but my preference would be not to reference the town comprehensive long range plan and the town's climate action resilience plan. I did look through the town's comprehensive long range plan, and there's nothing that's really on point that I would understand in terms of, like, what does it mean to be in accordance with that plan vis-a-vis this bylaw. So I think if we should go through that exercise now, if we're creating that in the bylaw, we should go through that exercise now and make sure that we understand what that means to be in accordance with that vis-a-vis this bylaw. Especially because if we write it this way, like, if we're saying it's going to be in accordance, we're going to require people to be in accordance with future plans that we don't know what they are vis-a-vis this bylaw. So there's even more uncertainty there. So I think if there's a question, well, I mean, I have a question on how someone would comply with that. Now, with having a plan and not knowing what future plans would say, that's a little problematic for me, but I don't know if that's, I guess if we do this elsewhere in the town ordinance, then maybe it's not a problem, but I don't recall that I see this happen a lot in terms of, like, referring to plans. So I would just state a preference for taking those out. And making it specific, like whatever it is in the plan that we're saying we want to refer to, like, bring that in to the bylaw. So and with that, I think I've taken my time.
I don't think taking it out changes anything substantial.
Yeah, I think it kind of speaks for itself that, if we take it out, I agree.
So Elizabeth, were you saying,
So wait,
you're like, don't bother taking it out, or were you like,
I
take it out?
don't, yeah, no, I say I would agree.
Okay.
It's up to the
Okay, and
board.
Haley, you're okay with that?
Yeah, I
know.
mean, you know, preserve natural landscape, period. I don't think it necessarily needs to, yeah, refer to the long range plan.
What do others on the board think? Are we losing something? Or do you agree that it, or do you just like, what do you think?
Well, I think that we were looking to put in more, something that more, what's the word I'm looking for? Definitive that people could point to, but it may be, Kate, I think you're making a good point. And I mean, the comprehensive long-range plan certainly talks in general terms about preserving landscape and conserving land and the like, but I can't imagine anybody who would be looking at an earth removal permit application is going to go reference the long-range plan as a standard for what it means to preserve the natural landscape. I think in this instance, it's probably sufficient. There's other things here that are pretty specific when we look at excessive dust, protecting surface groundwater, protecting and maintain steep slopes. But I think just the general concept of preserving the natural landscape is sufficient without reference to the comprehensive long-range plan. On the other hand, to create a sustainable design in accordance with the town's climate action and resilience plan, I do think we should reference that, because I think there's a lot of what constitutes a sustainable design is not as sort of established and agreed upon. So you want to be able to reference something that puts some flesh on those bones. That's my thought. So I would agree with the deletion if you.
I think the only thought that I had, Elizabeth, which I know we kind of emailed a bit on, like, what is the definition of slope, and like, is it steep or is it moderate? And I know there was a desire to be specific in here and define, you know, the specific slope to be protected. But I think it was Framingham's, right, that I had sent that was like moderate slope, which was, I think, 15 degrees versus 20. But my only thought was, you know, is that piece maintaining steep slope perhaps in conflict with like the definition of sustainable design, which like probably arguably is more like, you know, something less than 20 degrees. But maybe having both, I don't know, as long as we have sustainable design in there, maybe it's not as much, maybe I'm overthinking it, but that just was the one thing that jumped out at me is, you know, if a developer is like, oh, 20 degrees is being defined in here, I'm good to go, that's sustainable.
Well, I don't think sustainability and the definition of steep slopes are comparative.
Okay, so you know, yeah, okay, yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, a sustainable design would be the use of low impact drainage, would be, you know, use of, you know, rain gardens and natural habitat, you know, or natural, you know, landscaping that you know, coordinates with, you know, the natural habitat and assists with recharge of groundwater. And so I don't think they're one and the same.
Okay.
So is the consensus to delete this?
Yeah, I agree with the deletion.
Okay. Anything else?
Look, I just want to thank Haley and Elizabeth for the work on this. And
Yeah.
great. And excited to see what the ZBA comments are. Look forward to that.
Okay.
So on this, when you say ZBA comments, are we recommending this for consideration then, but it's the next going to the ZBA and they've then recommended on them. Help me understand the process.
So no, I mean, the board would have to vote tonight whether you wanted to put this bylaw amendment forth for the town meeting.
Mhm.
But between, I'm going to say probably now to when the public hearing is, to get some feedback from the Board of Appeals on these items and whether they felt something might be too ambiguous or something needs to be defined a little bit better, or just to get their input.
Okay, great. I was just a little confused as to whether there were additional procedural steps for this, unlike the other ones. So thank you, Elizabeth. Yep.
Because it's not, well, I think it's a new added step between, from the last 2 years. I don't think previously the Board of Appeals was ever involved or even, looked at bylaw amendments. And then, they just happen and then it goes to the board and the board's like, well, this isn't helpful. So having the Board of Appeals, provide their input was something that came out of your joint meeting with them the last time.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks for the reminder on that. Well, let me maybe on this one, first ask if anybody on the board has any other comments, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll open it up for public comment because we've done a lot here, and then we can entertain a motion if that makes sense. So any further comments or questions from the board? Okay, if there's any members of the public that want to say anything, and you can use your raised hand, which Sue has used. Thank you, Sue.
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple of comments. First of all, I'm not sure why you added this section of definitions unless it was a request from town council. I've been reading back and forth between the goals in 7532 to preserve this and that versus the definitions. And given that you say to prevent excessive dust, noise, odor, washouts, and traffic, I don't actually see. It says excessive, and I don't see that the definitions add anything at all except a definition of what a steep slope is. That is to say, it doesn't seem that they pin down what excessive means any more than the word excessive pins it down. So that's my personal opinion. Now, item H, to protect and maintain steep slopes. I can't figure out what the goal of this item is. Do you mean to protect and maintain steep slopes because it's just a good thing steep slopes are a good thing to have in the world? Or does this mean to protect and maintain steep slopes so that they don't wash out? Because those are two very different things. And if it's only so that they don't wash out, then that's already covered under E. And if it's to protect and maintain steep slopes, I mean, earth removal and fill to some degree inherently could damage steep slopes. That might be the exact point. So, and maybe that's the point of the article. I'm just trying to pin that down. Let's see. You deleted in accordance with the comprehensive long-range plan from item A, leaving it as to preserve the natural landscape. But again, removal and filling of earth inherently damages the natural landscape by changing it. So I kind of liked it better with in accordance with the comprehensive long-range plan, because that has some statement of what's nice about the natural landscape because then a proponent could argue, stepping back a second, Burton, you said no proponent would go and cite the comprehensive long-range plan, and you're completely right. The point of stating it here, I thought, was so that the planning board or the ZBA could say, yes, you plan to remove this much dirt, and that's fine. You plan to fill that much, but we find that to be outside of the scope of the long-range plan. So it's for the opposite reason. And if you don't say in accordance with, then it sounds like no dirt can be moved at all because it damages the natural landscape. And I believe that that was the sum total of my comments. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue, for those. I think that if I can, Elizabeth, speaking to the inclusion of the definitions, I mean, you could imagine somebody sort of bloviating and saying, well, you've talked about noise and dust, and you talk about odors, but what are those things? You know, anything that any human activity is virtually going to create some kind of noise, and or maybe I think that this provides something more specific that you can point to. It also, I think, to Elizabeth's point, makes clear that we're talking about things that are within our purview to address in our regulations, as opposed to things that where there is where the field is entirely taken by another regulatory authority, like Elizabeth mentioned, pollution, and the bodies that are, planning boards can't go in there and regulate, carbon dioxide, for example. So I think the definitions are helpful. I do think they're a little amusing, honestly. The definition of sound, the definition of odor, but I do actually think they are helpful. I know as a planning board member, I oftentimes, there's lots of places that look where in our bylaws you look and there are subjective considerations that need to be made, and those can be very helpful sometimes, but they also, I think, can raise the possibility of a challenge, and especially for people that don't look at these things regularly, you look around trying to find some guidance. I like the definitions. As to the point about, well, in any addition or subtraction of earth will inherently not be preserving the natural landscape. I think that's a really good point. And I'm just looking at the wording there. It says,
yeah. So Burton, can I sometimes my brain works. See if this is, so for this sentence, and are designed to minimize changes, and end it there. And you can have to existing contours, to the natural landscape, to natural drainage patterns. So basically the test is minimize changes to habitats and habitat connections. And to I'm gonna have to think about how the others can fit into this.
That doesn't work, but you could take the words to minimize and stick it into item A and make A, B, and C be a joint item to minimize changes to the natural landscape, natural drainage patterns, and habitats and habitat connections. And then item B would be to create a sustainable, et cetera.
Yeah, well, it would actually be a 4-part item, because you could bring down existing contours as well. So it could say are designed A to minimize changes in existing contours. And I guess instead of saying preserve the natural landscape, you could say changes to the existing contours and the natural landscape. Comma, well, actually there.
Yep.
Well, is it, so minimize changes to the existing contours in the natural landscape?
No, get rid of the and. Burton was right the first time. It should be a 4-part part item, existing
Okay, so
contours.
I'm
comma,
gonna
the
finish my thought and then you can correct me. So to Sue's first point on the minimize, you're gonna minimize changes to existing contours, natural landscape, natural drainage patterns, habitat and habitat connections. So, all 4 of those could be item A.
Mhm.
It could be, but they could also be fine as is, in my opinion.
Well, but you wouldn't say to minimize changes to existing contours and natural landscapes, to minimize natural drainage patterns, to minimize,
Oh, I was gonna say, like, just keep to maintain, to preserve.
well, so that gets back to the point that Sue made previously. Any cut and fill operation is not gonna preserve, all the habitats or habitat connections. It's not gonna maintain the natural drainage patterns. There probably is going to be some changes to
Okay,
some
I
of
see what you're saying. Yeah.
the drainage patterns.
Okay, so, but okay, so minimize is a good word. Yeah, so comma, after contours, I'd say comma, the natural landscape, natural drainage patterns, and habitats and habitat connections.
And this would be the punctuation. Is it and or is it or?
I would say
And
yeah. But I would have put a comma after patterns because we've got habitat and habitat connections, but I'm going to defer to my comma expert, Sue.
Okay.
And whether we should be using the Oxford comma when we're having in front of after patterns.
All right. So now, all right. Now I leave it to Sue to correct.
Well, so there's no need to keep habitat and habitat connections as a single thing. You can just say natural drainage patterns, comma, habitats, and habitat connections. Now, if it was up to me, I would rewrite every document in the entire town to use the Oxford comma, but it's not up to me, and it's never used, so stay that way.
Okay, so now we're making it 2 separate things, habitat and habitat connections with no Oxford comma. And you can live with that, Sue. You'll be able to sleep tonight. Okay.
No, because there's no Oxford comma, but I wasn't going to sleep anyway, because there was never going to be an Oxford comma.
All right. I like it. I think it's a good improvement, Sue, and I appreciate the suggestion. The only remaining change, I think, Elizabeth, is to fix the letter, the subsection lettering. And just D. You had A, D, C,
A,
D.
B, C, D, O,
Yep.
A.
Just a question, because here everything is, I guess the assumption is that removal or fill is necessarily going to be detrimental. Whereas before, we also had things about enhancing land utilization and drainage and so on. And so here I'm not seeing that there's any encouragement to in any way improve the property.
There's item B.
Create a sustainable design. Okay. I mean, Okay,
I mean, I think that talking about enhancing attractive land utilization is not about, is not intended to drive modification of the natural landscape to increase its utility. I think that's saying when you utilize the land, it should be done in an attractive manner. And I think the principles we're applying here are that we would like to see we'd like to see people not remove hills or otherwise disturb the natural landscape or the way the water drains and so forth.
What's attractive land utilization to one person may be different to another person.
Well, and we as a board I think part of our job is to set the basis by which it should be measured. Well, I should say, we should recommend to town meeting, but the town can decide are the basis by which we want to measure attractiveness of land utilization. Now that we've revised this, are the board member, is a board, anybody have any further comments, questions, edits? I like it. We've had public input. Or any other members of the public interested in making any comments? Let's see, 3. Give people a second just in case there's an effort to raise hands. All right. I think that we've made tremendous progress. This is our last warrant article, and I think then all that's left to do would be to provide a motion to recommend it to the town meeting. So I'll go ahead and do that. I would move that we recommend the revised earth removal and fill bylaw warrant article for consideration at the annual town meeting.
I second that motion.
Thank you. With that, we can, Elizabeth, who was that? Linda or Kate? You make the call. It was Linda. And then we'll go around the horn with all in favor. Linda,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Haley,
Yes.
Nathan,
Yes.
and I am also in favor. So that's a unanimous recommendation. Town meeting. Wow, we got through them, and it's 9:04. I think that just leaves sort of the last administrative items, which are, let's see. We've done the planning board meeting minutes. Any liaison reports? Okay, I don't have anything from the CPC. So with that, I think we can adjourn. Elizabeth, is there anything we need to know looking forward? Do you want to?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, great. Thank you for everybody's focus tonight, and we're adjourned.
Great job. Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.